Hello and welcome to my lunch break, where I'm going to attempt to do a little bit of browsing here on this website that I found recently. Perhaps you've heard of this before. It's called Artbreeder, previously called GAN Breeder. And it is it's something I'm going to have a bit of a difficult time defining because I don't have a ton of expertise on the topic, but it utilizes a generative neural network and machine learning genes, which I'm not entirely sure how that works, to modify images. It gets trained on a bunch of images and then can combine all of that internal information to create and generate entirely new images. And part of how this happens is people that aid this process and generate their own images based on what the network has already been programmed with. So as an example, the front page of this site shows some featured versions of images that people have generated, and most of these just kind of look like normal images, but let me click on this one. There's a couple different sections here. So here's the image. You can see a bigger version of it. This is a nice example because it looks very much like a photograph, but it's not. Here on the right are variations to this image that the network has calculated out and ran some of the internal information through some modulations and come up with these different variations. On the bottom here, these are versions of the image that other people have generated, either using this kind of pre-selected information, or by crossbreeding with another image, or by editing the genes directly. So again, I'm not an expert on how this works, but each of these is a tag that was associated, that is associated with this image, is inside of this image in some way, and you can change these values to change the image. And then there's chaos, which is not a tag. This is a measure of entropy, I'm pretty sure, it used in generating the image. If we take barn all the way up here, it's arguable, but you could say that the image has become more barn-like because we've taken that value up. What are some others here? Umbrella. I don't know about that. You could say that those look like the folds of the umbrella. A lot of this is not intuitive because it's not based on semantics in any way. It's only based on tagging and internal vectors. I'm obviously struggling to express how this works. Let's go to the About page. That will be a little more helpful. Okay. About Artbreeder. Artbreeder aims to be a new type of creative tool that empowers users' creativity by making it easier to collaborate and explore. Originally GAN Breeder, it started as an experiment in using breeding and collaboration as methods of exploring high complexity spaces. Artbreeder is named after the research of Breeder, which investigated the role of exploration in the optimization process. It is also inspired by an earlier project, Facebook Graffiti, which demonstrated the creative capacity of crowds. What's worth noting here, there are actually some social abilities here. You have a profile, and mine is empty right now, but when you create things and then favorite them, they will appear in your gallery. And then you can also be followed by people and follow other people. So this website is also a social experience. Contributions, those are all worth looking at, but tech. So generative adversarial networks are the main technology enabling Artbreeder. Artbreeder uses these specific learning training models, and there's an open source version available, which it looks like is still called GAN Breeder. But the name of this site has changed. Images are quote-unquote bred by having children mixing with other images and being shared. This is an experiment in using breeding and sharing as methods of exploring high complexity spaces. And it looks like you can download this yourself and run all this yourself, which doesn't look like it's too, that looks fairly straightforward. That might be interesting to try sometime. But if you're on the website here, I find this pretty interesting. I like the social aspects of it. This user has created this image and then derived 2 more from it. And I can derive my own. It's worth clarifying here. These images on the right were generated like when this picture was clicked on. So if I reload, they won't be the same images. These are being generated in real time. I like that one. Once I click on one, it quote-unquote creates it, and then I can click on that and derive further. I'm curious about the genes that are in this one. Got chain, jellyfish, mask, castle, church, face, kimono, hen, jaguar, Chesapeake Bay retriever, green mamba, hair slide, coral reef, flamingo, Alp. And you can also add genes. I don't find this process intuitive. I don't really understand a lot about how these genes are generated. A lot of them aren't tags that I would... Well, if we click on plants and fungus, for instance, we get the gene ocarina. And I don't know if this is just from the chaos, like maybe these are user-submitted tags, and so they're just not very well organized. Some of these are... this one, for example, this is ear, but it's an ear of corn, not like an ear. And if we wanted to tag it with ear, like a human ear, we wouldn't be able to, although we have a bunch of bears, so that's nice. Anyway, so I don't quite understand the genetic aspect of this, both either on a technical level or just a user interface level. But I find a lot of this process really interesting. There's also this slider here where you can generate images that are most similar to the one that already exists, or you can start getting more extreme with the underlying calculations and make images that are very different from the one that currently exists. I noticed this one seems to have an environment. This one looks like a tower. This one also looks like an environment. And I don't know exactly what this sea floor is, but that's kind of what it looks like. I don't know. This one looks like it has clouds included in it. You will notice, though, if you spend any time exploring here, that there's a lot of objects. There's a lot of images that end up being pretty unrecognizable. Let's see if we can find a good example. This one is a good example. I can tell that I'm looking at something here, but I would certainly be hard-pressed to tell you what it is, or even what its exact shape is. And that's what I find eerie about this neural network, is it's trained on all this visual information, but the visual information has very little context except for, the pixels that are around it. There's no need for constraints like physics or concepts. Just strictly visual pixel information, and that can be used to generate all these strange looking images. Again, at the bottom here, these are images that users have generated from this one. There's also you can see sort of the family tree of this image. So this is the most recent one, but it derived from these others. They all look extremely eerie. That's just really interesting. Can I? And I'll tell you what, this person seems to have a knack for cool images here. Wow. Oh, these are creepy. So I'm going to follow this person. And you'll see that on their gallery they've got the images that they've created, but then the images don't show up unless you have also favorited them. To return to my profile here, there's nothing showing up here, but I did create some, technically. Let's see, and if I favorite the one that I create, it'll appear when I navigate to my profile. Oh, can I click on? Yeah, so wow, these are just so creepy. I really enjoy these. I will say, when I first came across this, some of it was a little distressing. It was a little upsetting to see such a clearly defined, detailed image and then not being able to decipher what it is, what is being pictured. There was certainly a part of me that was very was made very anxious by that. I think I've moved past that response, but if that happens to you, I apologize. I can relate. As creepy as these are, they're so dreamlike. What are the genes here? And the genes are nothing that you'd expect. They're just normal objects, but they are tagged and calculated in such a way to create this image. If we turn up jellyfish, ooh, we get like a bunch of tendrils here. Oh wow! Power drill fountain. Oh, train. And you can go into negative numbers as well. Like if we put in negative umbrella, we get a specific result. Now, see, that's clearly what it looks like if you take away umbrella. I'll save this one, just save it. This is back on that user's profile. And then you can also favorite pictures that other people have made. Let's see, are they following anyone? They're following these people. I'll just click on some of these. Oh, wow. Some of these look so believable. I like this one because you could imagine this existing. It's not that hard. And then here's all the variations that people have made on that one. So this is advertised as a tool to create art, and I feel it definitely has that potential. I would say it's a little difficult. What this is something that's easy to explore, which is quite impressive. You can just wander around and eventually create or find something cool. If I wanted to create something intentionally, I think that would be quite a bit more difficult. Like I've got this image here that sort of looks like this building or some sort of structure here, and say that I wanted to put another structure here. I wouldn't know how to go about doing that, or maybe I'd want to put a road here. I'm not sure I could go about doing that. Although, let's see if there's any gene for road. And see, there's not. We've got streetcar and street sign. Highway doesn't work. Let's try browsing instead. If we look at landscape, we've got none of these seems like it'll give me roads. Let's try structures. Maybe we could try using some sort of bridge. Worm fence. What is a worm fence? And how did it get in here? Like, why is this a gene, but road is not? Patterns. I don't know that I would call comic book a pattern, but okay. I don't know that I'm going to be able to find a road of any kind. I think the closest I'm going to get is either like something like this, like a bridge or a pier, or let's just go with a steel arch bridge. And if I increase that value, what happens? Oh, the whole. See, now the whole structure here has become latticed, like a bridge might be. But if we remove bridge, we start getting what look like more natural formations. That's pretty interesting. Oh, hello to those of you in the chat, Walter and James. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I have to not get too excited about anything I'm looking at, which is actually kind of tough because I find this stuff so interesting. Look at this one. Oh. It looks like there's some fabric. There's lots of fabric-y type curves and things. Maybe some sort of aquatic jellyfish type of information. Oh, hey, jellyfish. As well as an African chameleon. Okay, no, that one I can actually see. Like, you can see scales and such if you turn up the chameleon value. Oh. And if you turn down the chameleon value, it looks like, I don't know, this almost looked like a group of people to me at first. But who knows? I don't know what's happening in this picture. I can reset that to just see the image. Something else that's kind of interesting to play with is the faces. If we go to the main screen here, you can see that faces are a lot of what people are creating. These are popular images, or trending, I guess. And the thing with faces is that faces have a set of like constraints or rules or patterns that can be computed. And so if we click on a face, we can generate a variety of very natural looking faces based on the information in this image. And I find that really interesting. I also find it interesting that none of like this person and this person, that those are not real people. They don't really exist. Hello, OVR. Thank you for joining. There's so much detail in her face, but they're all just like essentially the result of numbers that have been crunched and then re-predicted into realistic looking values. Sometimes it doesn't work out as well. You can see this one in the top middle has tried to combine some elements of faces that are maybe a little incompatible. So that happens sometimes too. and that can get a little distressing as well sometimes. But there's, in addition to photographic human faces, you can also, there's another category that's just anime. So if you're wanting some custom anime art, you don't necessarily have to get someone to draw it. You can just click through a few versions of pictures until you find one that suits your preferences. I do find it amusing that the anime standards, I guess, are so they have enough rules that are the same across different styles that you can just start out like a machine can start generating them. I won't spend too long on this, but the genes here are kind of interesting. Like you can open her mouth or close her mouth, or make her smile more, or make her smile less. You know, that sort of thing. So it's an interesting tool. So the categories here are, let's see, these are just general images. These ones are faces. Oh, this one is like character art. This one is album covers, which I think is interesting because album covers in general are pretty abstract and don't necessarily have a lot of real objects in them. You can tell that these all look like album covers, though. There's some sort of text information and some sort of central image, and that sure is what album covers look like. I also like that these simulate letters, but are not letters. Wow. This one looks like letters, but backwards. Testio, Tetsio, and then some Russian-looking letters. Very interesting. So if you didn't know how to read, you might not notice much of a difference. Let's go back. The other category, this one is landscapes, I believe. I like these ones with the colors. Wow. Well, these are gorgeous. Yeah. So we'll look at those. You can't see it, but I have a bazillion tabs open. Oh, and then I was going to say anime is the other category. So here's all the images that have been generated from this one up here. Most of them have mountains, like is suggested here, but this one becomes some sort of, oh wow. This could be like a mountain, but it's been kind of hollowed out, and there's like a central glowing cavern or cave of some kind. And over here, it kind of suggests clouds and mountains. And it looks like there's a figure here. I would say maybe a figure on a pack animal of some kind. Of course, that's not, directly indicated, but that's sort of the image that that is evoked for me when I look at it. Oh, I like this one. The mountain has become a little less natural looking. This looks more like a tower, like a constructed tower. And now the landscape is a little bit more, it looks more like a desert, maybe. It's kind of got this cracked look to it. And there's still a figure here, but they look solitary, like, I don't know, like a robot or something with those legs. And something I find fascinating on a technical level and just in general is that these images can be generated in real time. The numbers, they're fed to the machine and the machine spits them right back out and then they load on the page. It's just a very quick process. Now, that should be it should be noted that that is distinct from the training process. So, how to describe this? I'm not very good at describing this stuff because I'm still a newbie when it comes to machine learning. I've created some very, very rudimentary neural networks. I like to find very simple functions, like x plus 1 is one of the functions that I've modeled, and I think I successfully did the sine of x. So how to say this? The model is essentially the function or system of functions that results after you train a neural network on specific values. In the case of Artbreeder here, it was trained on images in these different categories. So with landscapes, it was trained with pictures of real landscapes, or maybe illustrated landscapes as well, but some of them certainly were real. And then through that training, it created the network created for itself a system of rules that kind of described to the machine, okay, here's the rules that make a landscape what it is. Here's the numbers, here's how different values are transformed relative to each other to do visual networks like this. Like, you have to have a lot of hidden layers that interface with each other. But anyway, the point is that it creates a set of rules for itself that end up being the model that it uses to generate new data. Walter in the chat saying that there's essentially no difference between man and machine. There's certainly some compelling arguments to be made that how a machine learns in this context is very similar to how humans learn. We train on different sets of data. For example, this neural network trained on just two-dimensional images, right? Units of pixels and their color values. Whereas we train on data that comes in through our senses. So the physical space that we're in, the images, the light that we see, the things that we can touch and hear, all of that is our training data. And it seems to be the case that we use this training data to construct a perceptual model in the same way that neural networks construct their models of data. And And I mean, it's not an accident that they're called neural networks, because they were designed to be that way. They were designed to learn in a similar way that a neuron or a set of neurons learns. And we've been successful enough at trying this out that we can create a machine that can generate images and art based on what it knows about other images and art, which is very similar to what humans do. Oh, this one just looks so natural. We've got a beach and a body of water and some hills and plants jutting out from the water. In the smaller version, those little specks just look like birds to me. This one is definitely more fantastical. I like these structures here. They kind of look like, I don't know, some sort of, it could be constructed, but it also sort of looks like a mushroom, like a giant mushroom tower of some kind. But we have some vertical lines over here that are suggesting some sort of buildings or something like that. And then these clouds that are covering this area very ominously. I like these images of trees. It's interesting that, like, some of this image I can tell that it's not real. Like over here, you can tell that, like, these aren't real objects. But over here on the left, this tree looks like it could totally exist. Except that it's also sort of connected to this tree down here. And so I wonder too, when we get more and more fidelity of data, how the predictions and the creations are going to change. Like if we fed a network like this 3D scans of environments instead, would it be able to generate a 3D environment instead of just a two-dimensional image? I'm going to say the answer is yes, because the principle is the same. And also, as soon as that happens, I want to be there in VR and exploring them in the same way I'm exploring these. Some of these get a little spooky. That one's kind of, I don't want to click on that one. This one too, it's kind of ominous. It looks like a face there at the top, so. Sort of an ominous figure here. Sorry, I'm going through my tabs right now, and I sure had a lot of them. The colors here are really nice. I have to guess that this originally came from a painting of some kind. So there's no genes here. All that was edited was the entropy value of the prediction. And if we turn that back to 0, we get something that looks very, pretty realistic. That's interesting. It's possible that you just can't edit the genes in the landscape images. I will also say I don't understand the role of the chaos property in this. I don't know if it's used as sort of a randomizing seed, in the same way you'd use in procedural generation of a lot of things, or I don't know what exactly. Oh, this one's really nice. There's like this canopy above with like the root system growing downward. Like this is, to me, this feels like an underground cavern with the roof of the cavern being filled with roots that sometimes reach down to the ground. That's good. The person who made that one seems to work mostly with people. Some of them are actually, they're all kind of weird looking because of this strange thing that's happening with their forehead here. The top of their head is missing. Let's see. Maybe there's some pictures I want to add to mine. What do I want to showcase here on my profile? I think this desert robot one. I like that one. And this one too, that looks like a beach. And I kind of like this one, although we haven't looked too closely at it yet. The thumbnail to this really looks to me like a fractal, these fractal visualizations. Yeah, I'll tell you what, Chris. I definitely, when I get involved in something like a new game or something like that, I start to dream about it. So if you spent long enough on this site, it would probably inform your dreams that way, and that sounds delightful, honestly. Although what I'd rather, so this is maybe a little speculative, but if you at night you plugged in and got your dream output at least partially processed by a neural network like this, so that you could have your dreams directly influenced by a neural network. How amazing would that be? I would have a hard time wanting to ever be awake if that were the case. Walter in the chat asks if I've heard of the Library of Babel. It seems to be a similar project, but with signs instead of images, at least with what I understand. I think I've looked at that before. Where they're trying to collect every single possible written sequences, right? If it's something like that, I've seen that before. I don't know if it does involve neural networks, though. I am not familiar with that, so maybe I should check that out. I would right now, except I want to be careful and curate the sites that I visit on a stream. But I will give that a shot. This image that looks kind of like a lighthouse derived all of these images. Some of them are really spectacular here. This one doesn't seem related at all. This one looks kind of horrific, like volcano, magma sort of place, hellish environment. there's also this, which is, wow. You can tell it's like a simulation of a city with buildings. And maybe it's just me, but I also don't think this building is completely straight up and down. I think it's curved to the side a little bit. I could be wrong. Sort of looks like it to me, though. I really like this one. It looks just so much like an object, but I wouldn't be able to identify it. It sure is a cool looking one, though. It's got this sort of this platform at the bottom, and maybe this transparent segment, and then a multicolored containing vessel of some kind that has some sort of central, I don't know, central something. That's great. When I get to an image that doesn't have any, that no one has derived anything from, it can be fun to explore in that way too, and to try to generate new images from what's here. But it's also, for at least a while, going to result in images that aren't as pleasing to look at. Oh, look at that, though. Futuristic toaster, maybe. You know, in the thumbnail, this area here actually to me looks like a reflection. Like maybe originally there was some information about a mirrored ball, but of course the machine is not going to have a concept of what a reflection is, and so it's going to interpret that as, well, I guess as static objects, but it also doesn't have any concepts for static objects, probably, at least not in the way that we have concepts for them. These, especially the images that look like objects, I keep looking at them and staring at them like I want to try to figure out what it is. What am I looking at? Because it's so recognizable. Oh, this one even has like a setting, right? Like it's good. There's this surface that it's sitting on, and sort of this background, like it's up against a wall. And this one too, although the setting starts to get a little more abstract. And so does the object, really. There's like a surface here that kind of starts going into a hollow. I like that. So it's like there's maybe a car in here somewhere, because this looks like a window of a car. A lot of these. Let's see. This one, the thumbnail for this one at least, like looked a little bit like an organized closet. I kind of like that. This one goes back to looking like a self-contained object, you know, like something with a border or a perimeter. Oh, see, I like this object. I don't know what it is, but I know that I like it. This is a nice, like, branch of images, I guess. Let's see where it comes from. With these, like, genetic trees, I actually haven't explored too deeply. I'm sure they're just really, really long. Oh, okay, so this user, Alan Pryke, crossbred two images together. This one here and this one here to generate this image, which was then iterated to this image. So that's cool. And then iterated on by ourselves until we got to here. So before that crossbreeding, we had some sort of fungusy or like algae looking things. And over on this end, we had, I don't know, sort of building looking things. That sort of looks like maybe a booth of some kind in the middle of a road. These walls on either side. Anyway, so on the left, we've really got some object, like lots of straight lines, sort of look like objects. This one sort of looks like a city. That one really looks like a city. And on the right, we've got some more organic forms. Like that. And these two, originally, let's see, it was this kind of strange fruit fungus looking thing that was crossbred with this rodent to become this organic line of images. Something that I also find a bit puzzling too is that the original images here are not themselves training images of any kind. They're not they're not photographs. They don't make any sense. They're still generated by the network. So I don't know exactly where they come from. Maybe the genealogy or whatever it is here that you want to call it, maybe it just stops after a certain number. Maybe it just doesn't track it anymore. I'm not sure about that. Let's look at another genealogy. Oh, I pulled this one up earlier because I really like this one. I think it probably came from mostly a normal looking person. Yeah, from this one, that one. Oh, people did some crazy stuff. Oh, wow. Oh, some of these are really scary. So I'm going to be spending some more time on this. This is just. I was going to look for. Let's just look at the lineage of this one. Pretty abstract shapes by this point. Let's see, it looks like this one. Oh. I feel like we saw this one earlier. Or one very, very similar to it. And I suppose it went into informing this image. Still pretty abstract for the most part. No real discernible objects. This one is maybe... Okay, so I think it just shows a limited amount because it derived from, like, this is one of the pictures it originally derived from, and then this one has its own lineage. Yeah, okay, so if you want to follow a picture all the way back, wow, look at this. I really like this sort of skeletal, sort of insectoid skeletal figure here. And if you see this as like the background, like some bridge, maybe, I don't know. Obviously the scaling doesn't quite work, but it's, to me, perusing these images is really just an interesting exercise in, I don't know, aesthetics, I suppose, because a machine can find patterns and mutate those patterns into a variety of images, and then the human mind takes those and interprets based on its underlying models, and images get brought to mind or identified or interpreted based on this manipulation of data. I don't know, it certainly feels collaborative, but it's collaborative between human and machine in a way that also feels, I mean, it's very natural for both types, right? Like the neural network is like made for this, and with us as well, we are naturally inclined to interpret aesthetic data and perceive objects and try to find beauty and coherence at the same time when it comes to art. And the machine is also trying to find coherence, but can it also find beauty? Is an interesting question. I would say that one's probably a little tougher because you'd have to train it on things that people find beautiful, and individuals are so varied in their aesthetic perceptions that you'd have a hard time with that, I think. You can see I've really followed some of these pictures back quite a ways, and we haven't gotten to anything yet that resembles photographs, really. Although some of these are just are really beautiful. Oh, looks like I missed a message. Sad. Well, apparently you could keep doing this until the end of time, and you'd never reach the bottom, which sounds familiar. As it is, it's been about an hour. My lunch break, I suppose, is over. So I think I'm going to sign off and get back to my work. Thank you very much for joining me. This was delightful to explore this with you and chat with you all about it. So take care, everyone, and I'll talk to you later.